On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use, welcome to the GBC podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. This is episode 43, created on March 17th, 2023. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm
Woo!
John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota, and Neil out on Hippie Mountain. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what kind of Irish beer you're drinking.
It is St. Patrick's Day. I am having a glorious Guinness.
What he said.
And my beer is green. All right. You can find us on YouTube, where we will have 400,000 viewers for this episode. We are also on Twitter. We are also on Twitter at Green Bay Chat, Facebook at the GBC Podcast, Green Bay Chat, and now just the audio is available. We'll be on Spotify. You just search for Green Bay Chat. What's our topic? It's Aaron Rodgers. It's been quite a week in Green Bay. We've got a bit to talk about, and that's really all there is, Neil.
Well, there's this free agency thing too, right? I mean, there have been movements of players that might matter, I guess, right?
Might matter, but there's, the one that's going to get us the 400,000 views is talking about Aaron Charles Rodgers, right? So he had a little event this week where they made a media spectacle out of it on the Pat McAfee show. Where, yes, I think thousands of disillusioned people were confident that he had some announcement to make. But really, when it came down to it, he only has control of two things, whether he plays or retires. That's really his choice. He could say, oh, I'm going to retire, or he could say, I want to play, which he did. But he put a caveat on that. He went a little bit further. And Neil, you're going to find a spot in your closet next to your Jet Favre jersey, aren't you?
It is his intention to play for the New York Jets, as was his statement. And so I did actually watch the Pat McAfee show because, well, I was stuck at home with COVID. And so what the hell else am I going to do? Right. So honestly, it was better than what I thought it was going to be. I thought that I've never watched the Pat McAfee show. There was entertainment as far as the host was concerned. The questions were reasonable. I thought Aaron came off a lot less harshly than he was reported on Twitter. That is, I thought that Aaron came off really well. There were obviously a few moments where he indicated his disillusionment with management, but he was overall extremely gracious to the city of Green Bay, to the fans of Green Bay. He shouted out to the Chives restaurant that I also enjoy when I'm in Green Bay. It was Aaron Rodgers sort of being Aaron Rodgers, and not that that's always the most enjoyable thing to listen to. He certainly has his douchey qualities, but whatever. It was Aaron Rodgers, and you got the package that you expect. And until it's once the announcement was done and he was continuing talking, it was a little bit less interesting. But I stayed on the whole time. It was perfectly reasonable way to spend an hour that I had nothing else to do because, again, I was home. So
well, and it was a whole lot of nothing. I mean, he really verified much of the information we already had, and however you trust your sources on what people say. I like the way he kind of put the kibosh on this concept that he gave a list of player demands that the Jets pick up, and already that's been proven false because the Bears went and grabbed Robert Tonyan relatively on the cheap. But there's been some movement. I think there's some legitimacy, though, to want to have some comfort or have some guys that come into the locker room with you. Because if he's going to try to take control over a new locker room, he's got to have one or two guys that are going to be yes men for him, right?
Well, and you look at the one guy who's actually signed for the Jets, Alan Lazard, right? This is somebody who obviously was a good, whether you call him a number 2 or number 3 receiver, but he was good in that role. And he's also excellent in the run blocking. And you look at what the Jets are going to want with an older quarterback. They want to be able to do the running and the passing, and having this run blocker who, in a best case scenario, can take out 3 defenders in one running play. That's a pretty good guy to have. It not an outrageous. I mean, more than the Packers were going to pay, but it's more than the Packers were going to pay for MVS the year before as well. And you're gonna $11 million is $11 million that the Packers fundamentally don't have. And for a 3 receiver, that is a little bit difficult to swallow for a team with the cap problems that the Packers have.
Well, you got to credit Alan Lazard. You don't take anything away from him. This is an undrafted free agent who worked his ass off, went from what they call the green mile in the locker room there, from the, what are the practice squad guys, worked his way over to the regular locker room and made a name for himself in Green Bay. Great. He's getting paid and he deserves it. But yeah, it is interesting to see how they're going to go together. And I think I can see the advantage to it. It will help. But yeah, from a financial perspective, I think you're right as well, Neil. There's just no way he was going to stay in Green Bay.
I mean, that's in the end what I think most Packer fans are with as far as Aaron Rodgers. This is, no matter how much people have tried to compare this to the Brett Favre situation, it's very different as far as the emotions among every Packer fan that I talk to or interact with. And that, fundamentally it's like, well, yeah, he's still a good quarterback, but $59 million is a lot of money to be paying a quarterback who, is last year was an average at best quarterback overall. It certainly had his moments, and Aaron always is going to have his moments. And I wouldn't count it against him as far as next year. I think he's going to have an excellent year. He's got that chip back on his shoulder, and that's always going to help him. But the fact of the matter is if you're getting average level quarterback play, you need to be doing more with the rest of your roster. And this is sort of the hell that the Minnesota Vikings are in with Kirk Cousins' contract, that they're paying a lot of money for somebody who is somewhat above average. And, as we saw with Jalen Hurts, right, you're on the cheap quarterback. You've got the ability to do other things on their roster. The Eagles were a phenomenal team last year because they weren't spending money on their quarterback, because they could spend money on every other position in the field. And you can already see the Eagles have had to dismantle a lot of what they had for their team last year because they've got to pay Jalen Hurts now. And Jalen Hurts is certainly somebody who's going to be worth that money. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes had the highest cap percentage for any Super Bowl winning quarterback. You get that level of quarterback play, well, then you're in a situation where you can absorb it. But I think most Packer fans are of the view that Aaron Rodgers' days of being the most dominant quarterback in the league are over. And that's what $59 million should be. So,
right. So here's the question for you. Aaron Rodgers, if and when he makes his way to the New York Jets, because the deal is not final yet. But Aaron Rodgers in a Jets uniform, is it going to be more like Joe Montana in Kansas City? Or is it going to be more like,
Jets, Jets.
Is it going to be more like Joe Montana in Kansas City, or is it going to be Peyton Manning in Denver? I don't see Rodgers doing in New York what Manning did in Denver. It might even be more like Joe Namath going to the Rams.
Well, that's an interesting question, though, right? Because the Jets team is actually good, and they've got a good defense already in place. They've got a good coach. So this is not Brett Favre going to the 4-12 Jets with Eric Mangenius, right? They've got Robert Saleh, who's excellent. They've got a team that was good last year. They were certainly on the verge of a discussion of being one of the better teams. And so I think that this is a perfect situation for Aaron Rodgers to potentially be successful. I think that he is going into a situation that gives him that possibility, and good luck to him.
Kind of that game manager role if he's got a good running game. And but that's kind of what he had in Green Bay, though, too, right?
Well, that's what he could have had. He's not going to play the game manager role. He wants to be the quarterback.
But he's better than a game. I think that's not giving Aaron enough credit. He's better than a game manager level. I mean, Peyton Manning when they won the Super Bowl, I mean, he was decrepit at that point. The year before, the year before that, he had the 55 touchdowns, different story. But you get to that Super Bowl, he was falling apart, but it didn't matter. And Aaron Rodgers is better than that level. Now, I don't think the Jets are at that same level as the rest of the Denver Broncos either. But this is a really good situation for Aaron Rodgers to be in. And I can certainly see the appeal of him wanting to go to the Jets to try himself out in a different environment.
Absolutely different coach, and certainly a different fan base. Then suddenly he's in New York, right? I mean, this is something that, perhaps from an ego standpoint, he's going from the smallest market to the largest market, right? It's probably intriguing, and can he use it may become a thinking man's quarterback or whatever, right? So I'm sure that the challenge is there. He did have a lot of nice things to say about Green Bay, like you said, and why wouldn't he, right? I mean, he's been very successful. As I was going back kind of, into his history sort of over the last number of years, though, you look at some of his statistics early in his career, mid-career, even, the mid-teens, some of these games were freaking phenomenal, right? And we just have not really seen, certainly not last year. I mean, granted, he had the MVP run, but those were not the gaudiest numbers in the world. Now, obviously, there's more to it than that, but you always thought prior to last year, like anything's possible, right? He can make any throw, be alert, like pretty much like Favre was, right? You never know. It's must-see TV. But man, there was a whole lot of plays
bad thumb that played in it a role in
that was a big part for a number of weeks where for the better part of almost 2 months. You kind of look at, okay, obviously him and Brady are very different. Brady made it all about him, right? And it was like pass. I don't see Rodgers quite going to that level in New York. Will he have success? Probably. But like I said, it's more, like I said, of that game, when he's counted on, perhaps he can make the plays, perhaps he can't. But again, that's what the intrigue is, and I think that's why the Jets are willing to give it a shot, right? Because they don't really have any other options.
Well, let's just go, right? I mean, somebody had posted the numbers for Jets quarterback touchdowns over the last decade. The Jets have not had a quarterback go over 16 touchdowns in a year in the last decade.
16?
I will bet 16 touchdowns. 16 was the most for any one quarterback in the last decade. And there were years that were,
that's not good.
Most of the years were less than that. I mean, yes, they had multiple quarterbacks, so they would add up to a little bit more, but Aaron Rodgers is going to do better than that. I will bet a fair amount I would bet a fair amount of money. I'm not going to bet on
prop. If we set the over under at 16.5, Neil's taking the over.
I would take the over too.
Take the over on that. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And so, is that, in the context of what the Jets have, something that is going to improve that team enough to be competitive in a AFC that's got a lot of good teams? Well, you'd say, based on the way we were thinking last year, maybe not, except for the fact that, well, Kansas City continues to have cap problems. The Bills fans are all complaining about not being able to sign anyone. They're losing players rather than gaining players. Mm-hmm. The Bengals are about to sign Burrow to huge extensions, so they're not going to have that same level of money. And you look at, well, you've got now the Trevor Lawrences and the Justin Herberts, but there's elements of risk there. This might be the perfect time to make a move into the AFC, despite all of the good players, all of the good teams that are in the AFC. I'd still rather be in the NFC overall, for sure, as a team, as a player, as a quarterback. But if you're going to be in the AFC, this might be a little bit of a window for you to do something.
I think it's a great marketing move, though, for the Jets as well.
Oh, totally.
You weren't selling any Zach Wilson jerseys. You're going to sell some Aaron Rodgers jerseys for sure. I mean, just from that perspective of marketing and bringing in, non-attendance.
Well, a buzz, an excitement, shot in the arm. Of course, yeah. It's huge.
But really, Jeff, to paraphrase my father-in-law to the New York Jets, he's your problem now.
Oh, totally. Because there was a tweet on how, Aaron Rodgers is quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. He's owner of the Chicago Bears, and he is general manager of the New York Jets.
Yeah.
So just, I mean, Aaron is, he's not bigger than the game. But he certainly exudes or exerts a fair amount of attention.
Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to when Favre was traded to the Jets. So, because I happened to be in New York on the day that Favre was traded. And so I happened to be in the West Village, and I don't remember what it was, but there was a very West Village sign. And one of my first tweets from one of my accounts was essentially, Brett Favre's not going to see this in Green Bay. So it was some drag show or something like that in the West Village. And so then I went to a sports bar afterwards, and it was just a throng of people that were celebrating. And then the local CBS News came by, and they were just interviewing people. And I was interviewed by the CBS News crew about, what's it like for Brett Favre coming to Green Bay. And I'm saying this as a Packers fan who is now becoming a Jets fan. I was a person who cheered for the Jets for a year, and I've always had a soft spot in my heart for the Jets. Back when I was in graduate school, I listened to the Jets games on the radio because I could hear them on the radio. I'd see a lot of Jets games. I'm a Mets fan. Mets fans and Jets fans are pretty tightly connected to one another. So I've always had a soft spot in my heart for the Jets, and so. Yeah, am I going to be watching Aaron a little bit when he's on the Jets? Yeah, I think I'm going to, because I like that sports atmosphere, and fundamentally, this is people who I'm friends with who are fans of the Jets as well, and so it's going to be an interesting environment. I'm going to be in New York this weekend. I'm actually kind of hoping that the trade goes down this weekend. I get to experience the same thing again.
Well, Neil, that just shows you don't know anything about marketing. They're not going to announce a trade over the weekend. It didn't happen here before we went on to record. It'll happen Monday or Tuesday next week. I knew it wasn't going to go on Wednesday. I was kind of hoping it would be today as well, but I see where you're going with that.
Well,
I
and
don't
it
need,
might not be for till the draft,
right. Who
or it
knows?
might not
Because
be even till
it's between
June
these two
1st.
teams to negotiate what the compensation going back and forth is. You remember Brett Favre was only a 3rd round draft pick, so I really hope we get more than that for Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, it'll be interesting if push comes to shove and the Jets and the Packers can't agree. Boy, what happens? Yeah, when
Yeah.
draft rolls around and then even if it goes even later than that, it can get interesting. So I know that Neil's got a lot of positives he wants to talk about on the Rodgers career. I will go out and just put it out there. I'm ready to be done with Aaron Rodgers. I appreciated his time here. I love that the last 30 years that the team that I love had, 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Unceremoniously, both of them kind of got dumped near the end of their careers. It's a shame that things don't work out that way. But I think with Rodgers, for me, it kind of ended last year with the I've been immunized bullshit. So I'm okay. I'm done with the semantics games and everything else. It was great watching him play. I cheered along, and I'll be happy when he comes around for his induction ceremonies and name in the Ring of Honor and all that good stuff. But for now, I'm ready to turn the page and let's get on to this next season and see what Jordan Love and the rest of this team can do, because change is inevitable. Let's take it and let's move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what Jordan Love does, and the fact that the coaching staff has this level of confidence that they're willing to turn away from a quarterback who may not have been at his best, but still is a really good quarterback and still is going to cost us money this year. That they're willing to move on to Jordan Love says a lot as far as I'm concerned. And obviously, Jordan Love showed a lot during the course of this year as well in his limited appearances, and that's certainly worthwhile.
Well, the times they are changing, and we're going to talk about them. Aaron Rodgers is going to be our Packer history report. Jeff's got some information, and by golly, probably our Packer player of the past as well, because I know Neil loves spreadsheets and statistics, and he's got just a whole bunch of information out there in front of him ready to go. Don't you, Neil?
I do. And so I will note that this is episode 43 of the podcast. I-43 is the road that takes you into Green Bay, and it's the road that takes you out of Green Bay. So we're taking I-43 out of Green Bay, get Aaron out to New York, but we're going to celebrate what Aaron Rodgers did for us with the Packers. So starting quarterback since 2008, obviously, as he likes to note, he is the longest tenured Packer player ever, although he does not have the most games, but the most seasons with the Packers. So overall, 223 regular season starts, 147 regular season wins, 75 losses, and 1 tie. 5,001 regular season completions, 7,660 passes. So that's a lot of passes that he's thrown for the Packers. Completed 65% of them, 59,055 regular season yards, 475 touchdowns to only 105 interceptions. 6.2% of his passes were touchdowns, 1.4% were interceptions, an overall quarterback rating of 103.6, 7.7 yards per attempt regular season over the entire time for the Packers. And to me, when I'm determining whether it's a good season or a bad season for Aaron Rodgers, it's that yards per attempt that's telling me where Aaron is in a given season. 7.7 over a career is really freaking good. 21 fourth quarter comebacks overall regular season, 31 game winning drives. So we've had a lot of really good times with Aaron Rodgers, and we should certainly celebrate those good times. In addition, he only had 3 seasons in which he was below 500 as a quarterback. His first in 2008, in 2018, the last year of Mike McCarthy, and the year that we just completed. Now, that's a little bit of a fuzzy thing because there are 2 seasons that he did not complete. 2017, he was 4-3, but the team was 7-9. So 4 seasons essentially below 500 over that entire time. Well, for those of us who were kids in the 70s and 80s, that's a whole lot better than where we've been as far as our lives are concerned. And then of course, we without with Aaron Rodgers, we're talking about Aaron Rodgers. We've got to talk about the playoffs. He was 11-10 overall in the playoffs, 501 completions, 774 attempts, 65% clip in the playoffs. He was a good quarterback in the playoffs, 5,894 yards. So more than a full season's worth of work in the playoffs, 45 touchdowns, only 13 interceptions in the playoffs. So in 1 fourth quarter comeback, 2 game winning drives as far as the playoffs are concerned. He's given us excellence for a really, really long time. And, some of those numbers are all-time best for the Packers. Specifically, the 475 touchdowns is the most for any Packers quarterback of all time. That 1.4% interception rating is also good. Now, some other things that Aaron Rodgers did, he ran the ball a lot. And we talked about this during the season, that his rushing is really at a different level as well. He was 11th overall as far as Packers rushing numbers in his career, 3,466 regular season rushing yards. That puts him just below Paul Hornung for total rushing yards regular season for the Packers, and ahead of Eddie Lacy, ahead of Edgar Bennett as far as total rushing yards for the Packers. He also had 285 rushing yards in the playoffs, 35 regular season rushing touchdowns, 4 postseason rushing touchdowns. So 39 total rushing touchdowns, in addition to all of those passing touchdowns that he made for the Packers. So, we've had a really good run. And one of the things that was most striking to me in looking at the statistics of Rodgers is comparing those to Brett Favre. And it's just remarkable how the overall numbers are essentially similar. Favre played more games. Favre had 160 wins. So Favre is still the leader for total wins, somewhat more losses at 93. Total number of completions, total number of passes, Favre a little bit ahead, obviously way ahead as far as the interceptions are concerned. But
way ahead.
Yeah, but although, it goes other ways too. Aaron Rodgers is way, way ahead as far as the total number of sacks are concerned. It's actually pretty remarkable how many more sacks Aaron Rodgers took over the course of his career than Brett Favre. So they kind of
you got to be a really good quarterback to throw 370 interception.
It's only 286, John.
286.
Yeah, I was gonna say
you got to be a really good quarterback to throw 286 interceptions.
That's one of those things, statistics that probably is not going to get broken. I mean, that's
because you're not going to last. And the game is different. I think that's
right.
One of the things that when you look at statistics and this new generation of podcaster and analytics people, they often forget that the game is a whole lot different now than it was in the 90s, and the game in the aughts was different. And I would also argue that Brett Favre had much worse coaching in Ray Rhodes. Obviously, that was only 1 year. Mike Sherman, though, was atrocious, and then he had the worst GM as far as Mike Sherman is concerned too. And so my overall approach, or my overall discussion point for Favre whenever talking about him, is he made the NFC championship in 95, 96, 97, age 27, and then not again until 2007. In the prime of his career, went 10 years without making the NFC championship, and then again made it in 2009. That tells you everything you need to know about Mike Sherman, the fact that Mike Sherman failed everywhere he coached.
How shitty of a coach he really was.
But overall,
it's a hell of a tangent you went on, Neil. All right.
Well, but overall, they're really similar. And the only other comparison point that you'd make is that Aaron Rodgers did miss a number of games because of injury. So if you take out the games that Rodgers missed because of injury, the quarterbacks who played in place of Rodgers because of injury were 5, 11, and 1. And you compare Rodgers and Favre, you got to take into account that, well, there was never an injury game with Favre.
Literally, never.
So 5, 11, and 1 for the quarterbacks in place of Aaron Rodgers. But obviously the overall numbers, it's just remarkable how similar those numbers are, looking at basically every single number. And there are a couple things that are a little higher and a little lower, but really just incredible overall numbers. Again, we've been incredibly blessed as a franchise to have incredible quarterbacking since 1992. There is one statistic where Rodgers blows Favre away. Total number of tackles in the NFL. Rodgers has 1, Favre has 0.
Oh. And wasn't that tackle extremely memorable too? He depleted the guy.
That interception return, yeah.
Yeah. It is pretty amazing. Like I said, I think that interception, nobody's going to touch that, because nobody will be playing not only that long, but will be allowed to make that any interceptions going forward.
Well, again, the game is very different, right? So if you look at Favre's numbers as far as interception percentage relative to the norm for quarterbacks, he was only above the normal number of interceptions for quarterbacks only 5 years in his entire career. I mean, he was not, there were a few years that were obviously really high, but it wasn't that many. It's not that he was unusually high number of interceptions for a quarterback. It's just that the game is different now. And I think his last season in Minnesota went to that point, right? He threw 7 interceptions his last full year in the NFL. And it's not that he was a better quarterback at age 39 than he was as a younger player. It's just the game was different and the game is played differently. But even looking at the playoffs, right? Rodgers was 11-10 in the playoffs. Favre was 12-10 in the playoffs. I mean, the numbers are basically the similar. We've had incredible play and MVPs. Now, 4 for Rodgers, 3 for Favre, but Rodgers only had one other top 5 as far as MVP. Favre had 3 others in the top 3. So, I mean, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other as far as the numbers are concerned. It's the game. They obviously have a different style as far as the game is concerned, and that's really what it is. You've got a style that's more averse to making mistakes versus one that is more aggressive towards making plays. Both of them were enjoyable in their own right. It's been 1992 to 2022, 31 years of great quarterbacking for the Packers,
uninterrupted. No break, and that may go down historically as well. But regarding the interception, so it's kind of the outliers, right? Because you've got Rodgers, who over the course of 17 years, 100, call it 100 round number. I mean, that's gonna not probably be broken either in terms of the low number. So no, it was incredible. And the 6 touchdown games, the perfect game, things like that. I mean, will we, could we see some of these, kind of one-off things again? Yeah, probably. But just over the course of an entire career of the whole body of work, amazing and exciting. And like I said, there's at no point until really last year, we were like, oh, this, like I would say Superman or whatever you want to say, like the play, we just kind of expected the play to be made, right? That they were going to win, that there was going to be this like, oh my God, throw, whether it was Favre, whether it was Rodgers, right? You had both of them, right? Whether you're John Madden or Joe Buck or whomever, it was must-see TV. And it, little old Green Bay, not only with, these franchise, these historic quarterbacks, it's amazing. And hopefully, Jordan, we can go do the trifecta. Can we do it?
And well, you talk about historical, and obviously no team has ever done that. The 49ers are kind of the ones you look at Montana to Young.
Close,
and, yeah. I mean, if you had said to me in 1985, hey, John, in your adult years, the Green Bay Packers are going to have 31 years worth of Hall of Fame quarterback play, and you're going to get 2 Super Bowl trophies, I would have said, yeah, sign me up. There's still morons out there who look at it and go, oh, you only got 2 Super Bowls. Come on. Super Bowls are not easy to win. If they were easy to win, it wouldn't be called
John, I disagree with that point.
You're going to be a moron, Neil?
No,
okay.
I'm not a moron. I'm a thinker, John. That's the difference. And if you're going to be a great quarterback, you should be elevating your game. I mean, I think that's the biggest knock against Drew Brees, right? Is basically had the 1 year in which the Saints knocked out Brett Favre through injury, and that's the only thing that he did. He was a stat monger, and I think that there is something for the quarterbacks that have won more than one. I mean, Andy Reid cemented his legacy with this year's Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes has established himself at a different level with that second Super Bowl, and if you're talking about being among the all-time greats, yes, that component does matter. Yes, it is difficult to win a Super Bowl. Yes, it is difficult to repeat, but we've had those opportunities. And what I will say is
we haven't. You even said it yourself, Neil. It comes down to coaching and general manager. I mean, look at the drought of the 10 years of Favre, the example that you gave.
I agree.
Andy Reid is a great coach who's been blessed with great quarterbacks, and he brings them back again and again. There's more to it than just the quarterback.
Sure. I don't mean to put this all on Rodgers. I believe me, I think that Mike McCarthy and Matt LaFleur deserve a lot of the blame as far as what Rodgers did. And let's go right back to Rodgers' greatest season, the 2011 season. And quite frankly, the game that to me is the most disappointing Packers game other than Super Bowl 32 that I've ever witnessed in any way. And certainly the most devastating one as far as being at the game. That 2011 season, we're coming off winning Super Bowl 45. Rodgers throws at a 68% completion clip, 4,643 yards in only 15 games because they let Matt Flynn throw the last one, but 14-1 as a regular season quarterback, 9.2 yards per attempt as a quarterback. That is extremely rare air. 45 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, a 122.5 quarterback rating. That is a record all time for the best quarterback rating in any one year. And
Probably by a lot too. I mean, that
Yeah.
sounds like astronomically high.
Yeah. And so that game against the Giants in the 2011 divisional round it's just so disappointing because just as we talked about the failures of Andy Reid, just as we talked about the 2007 NFC Championship game, it was a situation that was built for the Packers. We were set up. We were clearly the best team in the NFL that year. Other years, you can say, well, we had weaknesses in this, we had weaknesses in that. In 2011, we were the best team in the NFL, 15-1. And fundamentally, we decided, let's just run the ball 12 times. That's good enough. We're going to make Aaron Rodgers throw 46 times in a playoff game in January in Lambeau. And I don't care that he's Superman. That is not a balanced game plan. And the Giants coaches were good coaches. They game planned appropriately for what the Packers actually did versus what they should have done. They caught the Packers in the trap, and we lost that 2011 divisional round. And, that's where we went from, the Packers beat Pittsburgh in the Super Bowl. And absolutely, you should correctly be thinking dynasty at that point. We had an incredible defense. We had an incredible offense. We had a great set of wide receivers. We had players that are legends for all time for the Packers, and we screwed up against the Giants. Rodgers did not have a bad game. It's that Rodgers threw the ball 46 times, and well, as we know in the playoffs, if you don't have balance, you're playing with fire, and you play a good team, a team with a good defense, that fire is going to burn you. But having said that, I want to
say, let's pick it up. Come on.
I want to say with the positive games, and I think that I'd like to discuss some of our favorite Rodgers games overall, right? Because he's had great regular season games, he's had great playoff games. Let's focus on some of those great memories that we have, and I want to start out going to his first playoff game that he actually lost, because that 2009 season when we snuck into the playoffs and then played Arizona, I was actually down in Key West with our friend Dawn watching the game. Dawn was turning 40 that year. We were celebrating in a sports bar, and we watched Aaron Rodgers put on an absolute show that went to overtime. Arizona ended up beating us 51-45 in overtime, but Aaron Rodgers, 28 of 42, 423 yards, 4 touchdowns passing, all in the second half, plus a rushing touchdown. 5 Rodgers touchdowns in that football game. That told us that we had a great quarterback on our hands, somebody who was able to perform in the playoffs. And even though we lost that 2009 game against Arizona, that's what put him on the map as far as I'm concerned. That's what said, okay, well, he may not have been great as a backup, but he had already been showing signs, but we're Packers fans. In the end, it's how you're going to perform in the playoffs that matter. Aaron Rodgers put himself on the map for Packers fans, and he certainly established himself for me as a star quarterback against Arizona in that losing effort in 2009.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of games to choose from, obviously. Most of them, were kind of centered in the teens. I mean, so it took you, once he got rolling, you had that Super Bowl victory, the 15-1 season. One of the ones that, and I kind of, when I was looking back, this one kind of surprised me. I guess I remember this one, but I don't remember it. October 20th, 2019 versus Oakland. It's a 42-24 win in Green Bay. Rodgers was 25 of 31 for 429 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's not too bad. And so the passer rating was perfect. That 158.3. One of every 5 of his completions was a touchdown. One of every roughly 6 of his passes was a touchdown. That's pretty good. And that was in 2019. That was obviously was an MVP year, but that was like one of those, oh, okay. Because then there were some other ridiculous games. The other one, because again, he is the owner of the Bears. The November 9th, 2014, 6 TDs against the Bears. He's 18 of 27 for 315 yards and 6 touchdowns.
6 touchdowns in one half. 6 touchdowns in the first half.
So one of every 3 of his completions is a touchdown. And, so 145.8 was his passer rating. It was 35 zip at halftime. So, yeah, I mean, so twice in his career, he had 6 touchdowns. The other one was October 14th, 2012 at Houston. So this is on the road. It's another win, obviously, a 42-24 win. So that game, he was 24 of 37 338 yards, 6 touchdowns with a paltry 133.8 passer rating. So he just, like I said, going through and there's a bunch more. I mean, it was just, but these were, I would say commonplace, but this is sort of what we grew to, we got used to, I guess, or, some of these, it was just like, I mean, seriously, if he would have had like one of these games, like I said, 18 of 27 for 315 yards, even if he only had 4 touchdowns, okay, but he had 6, that's really good. You look back, we're obviously, rose-colored glasses. We want to remember the good things, and we will. Obviously, we are. But man, some of these things are ridiculous, right?
Well, I want to continue that discussion about the Bears, because including that NFC Championship game, he is 25-4 against the Chicago Bears.
Yeah,
he's won 11 of the last 12 times we've gone to Chicago. I mean,
yeah,
11 of the last 12 times, and his 64 touchdowns against the Bears, if he were a Bears quarterback, would rank 4th all time in touchdowns for Bears quarterbacks. 4th.
Shit.
And that's just Rodgers in games against the Bears.
Wow. That obviously says a little bit about the Bears QB situation over the last like 2 decades, but wow, that's impressive. So yeah, he can say he's the owner. I mean, stuff like that is just hilarious, right? I mean, just like, wow, you would be 4th.
So I didn't pick a specific game, but I have a story to tell.
Okay.
About 12 years ago, through my friend Ryan, I got to meet and interact on a few occasions with a guy named Chris Francis. Chris Francis was a wide receiver out of the University of Texas, El Paso, and played for the Green Bay Packers in 2006 and 2007. So he was there when both Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers were the quarterbacks of this team. And Chris is a guy who was on the practice squad quite a bit. He has, when you look in the Bible, Jeff, his name has an 8 next to it. He suited up for 8 regular season games. He has on his stat list, he's got 4 receptions in professional football games. And thinking about Aaron Rodgers, just in the picture you have up there, if you're going to make me pick a game, that's the game. I mean, the man was a surgeon as a quarterback, just very precise. And I asked Chris, I said, what was the fundamental difference between Favre and Rodgers as a quarterback? And he said, Brett threw a harder ball, but Aaron threw a tighter ball. And having played the game and throwing a football, you know exactly what that means. That when it comes in, and he went on to describe hearing the sound of the ball going through the air, the whiz through the air, and how different it is between that hard ball and that tight ball, that tightness of the Rodgers pass and the precision of the pass, and then we went on to joke a little bit about, making sure your proper form is catching that, not using your body like Antonio Freeman and things like that. But that was that's the one thing that I've always remembered about that was what Chris Francis said about Aaron Rodgers, is that he just threw a tight ball. And it was very evident watching him on TV. And unfortunately, it was very evident this last season, not seeing that tightness
with that
throw.
thumb issue. Yeah.
And I still contend, Jeff, that it happened before the thumb. That New England game before the thumb was not a pretty game. And so I think that unfortunately there was some decline this year, but there's a lot of great memories, like we said earlier, and just watching him operate. I think of Greg Maddux as a pitcher. Greg Maddux was an absolute just
in control
tactician.
Didn't throw
Jim
balls.
Rome called him a witch. He just had this ability to just mesmerize. And it's that surge and that precisionness of throwing that ball. And Rodgers, I think, was the same way as a quarterback with the football. And that's probably the main difference between Favre and Rodgers, and the main thing that I'll remember about Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, because Favre, I mean, the receivers, they talk about Favre finger, right? I mean, he'd be like, all right, I'm going to
the ball is getting here. The ball is getting here. No matter who the hell is there, the ball is getting there, and you better catch it.
Right. And so
I can share another story on that. I have another story.
But no, seriously, there were times you could see it where he would just like throw it as hard as he possibly could, almost daring, the defense, like, okay, if you get in front of this, you're going to get hurt more than anything else.
Yeah.
And more oftentimes than not, they were completed. I mean, obviously they were intercepted as well, but whereas Rodgers just didn't operate like that, right? There's no way he's going to throw up a ball like that. He's either going to put it where his receiver can get it, or he's going to throw it away. And it just, or, from the Super Bowl here, perhaps one of his most famous throws, right? Right. The touchdown pass where it just was ridiculous. It had no business getting fit in that just microscopic window. And yeah. So go ahead, John. What's your story?
Yeah, sure. Another story. Going back to like 2000, 2001, with the work that I was doing at the time, a business networking group was in Green Bay. They would meet weekly. It was called the Quarterback Club. And one day they'd always have different players, different folks they'd speak, right? It'd be a nice luncheon, business networking. Well, this another kid from Texas, Donald Driver, was the guy talking one day, and he's wanted to open up to questions. And I asked him, I said, tell us about your first experience with Brett Favre. And he's talking about, okay, so 1999, here he is, this 7th round draft pick, kind of skitty kid coming up to Green Bay. And, he said, reality set in. The first time he had to line up to go out and catch a pass from Brett Favre. And he described being on the wide out, just going out running that. And that ball came in and hit him so hard that it split his fingernail on the backside.
Ouch.
Caught it here, but it split his
He caught it correctly, form catch. but still managed to wreck his wow.
But that's a Favre story. But yeah, Rodgers, like I said, is just a different type of
surgeon. I think is the right description of Rodgers, right? I mean, it's just like he, sliced and diced to get it exactly where he needed to go. And so I guess I want to go back to that Super Bowl run in the 2010 season, because we've talked about Rodgers in the playoffs negatively. And I just want to remind everyone who's listening, just how good he was in that 2010 run. So first game, wildcard round, we play the Eagles. We won 21-16. Rodgers, 18 of 27, 180 yards, 3 touchdowns, also aided by James Starks, 123 yards rushing, but 3 touchdowns, no interceptions against the Eagles. Possibly his greatest playoff game based on the numbers was against Atlanta. So we won 48-21. Tramon Williams, 2 interceptions that game, including a pick 6. That's when he became Tramon motherfucking Williams. 31 of 36, 366 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a rushing touchdown. 4 touchdowns for Aaron Rodgers in that game. The game against the Bears in the NFC Championship, Rodgers statistically did not have a great game. It was a brutally tough game, but still 17 of 30, 244 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but he did have a key rushing touchdown that was the first touchdown in the game. Obviously, Starks and Raji completing that game. But the fact of the matter is that he's way better than Caleb Haney. He was way better than Jay Cutler in that game. They combined for 3 interceptions and a fumble in that game. So the Packers had that game. Rodgers did what we needed to do against a good Bears defense in that game. And then just a reminder, as far as Super Bowl 45, we beat Pittsburgh 31-25. Rodgers, 24 of 39, 304 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Touchdowns, 29 yards to Jordy Nelson, 21 yards to Greg Jennings, 8 yards to Greg Jennings in the fourth quarter to give us the 28-17 lead. And we really did not have a great running game against Pittsburgh in that Super Bowl. That Super Bowl was dependent entirely, essentially, on our defense and on the arm of Aaron Rodgers. So that 4-0 run for Rodgers is something that is legendary as far as Packers history is concerned.
And MVP of the Super Bowl, don't forget, as well. You look back on it, it was so improbable. And so it was one of those, it was interesting though. So as we've come to, over the last, decade, call it, with the amount, the NFC Championship games that the Packers have been in, which has been a handful of them, just for whatever reason, that Super Bowl run of 2010 was magical. Everything lined up. And it seems like everything throughout, I mean, the good teams, the great teams, the great players, whatever, it's just, there was like one thing that was goofy right? There was just something that, as we've discussed, Packer play of the past, things like that, whether it was Seattle, whether it just kind of, I would say the heartbreak, but just the goofiness that happened through those. So again, could it have been more? Was it almost more? Yes. But in terms of just, was it satisfying overall? Absolutely. You know, we get to watch the teams almost on a weekly basis on national TV, which somebody, you know, that doesn't live in the state of Wisconsin and that is too cheap to get, you know, what used to be NFL Sunday Ticket or whatever the hell it's called now, you know, hey, that's fabulous. You know, just, you know, turn on the 325 game or the 7 o'clock, you know, the national game on NBC or what have you. So just, that's a treat. And that, so what that does is, again, is it takes Green Bay and it continues to build the following, right? They're on national TV a lot. They're exciting to watch. They're good. And look at the monument really that Lambeau Field has become as well, what the city of Green Bay has done. They've, you know, it's now a destination. Like, people, no matter what team you root for, yeah, that would be cool to go to Green Bay. Let's hang out there. Hopefully that'll continue. Hopefully the winning will continue, but certainly Aaron Rodgers helped to build that legacy.
Well, Jeff, you talk about what the future could bring, and I think that that Sunday Ticket might have to be in your future, because I see a lot more noon Sunday games on the Packers.
But I know a guy.
Jeff may be using the cooler a little bit in this upcoming season.
I know a guy.
So I want to, you know, just again, we've talked about the negatives of when we've lost in the playoffs, but the number of superlative games that Rodgers has had in the playoffs. That 2014 playoff game in Green Bay, the Dez caught it game, as it were, that we won 26-21. Rodgers, 24 of 35, 316 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, fourth quarter comeback. We were down in the third quarter by 8 points. We won that game. Aaron Rodgers is the reason why we won that game. Probably my favorite game to attend in the Rodgers era was the 2016 wild card game against the New York Giants. So we had lost the New York Giants twice before, and you know, the game started out fairly close. It was a close game at halftime, but right at the end of halftime, Rodgers throws a bomb to Randall Cobb, and that happened to be right in front of where my seats were in the end zone. He throws it up high. Randall Cobb is sitting where right by the goalpost. He takes one step back, he catches it, and we go into halftime with a lead. We blow them out in the second half of that game, 38-13 victory over the Giants. Rodgers, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, 362 yards in that game. The following week, however, is Rodgers' best game in the playoffs against Dallas. And you know this game, this is the Jared Cook game. We won 34-31, in which Dallas tied the game with 35 seconds to go. And on a 3rd and 20, Aaron Rodgers escapes from pressure, throws it a bullet downfield on the edge of the sideline where only Jared Cook could catch it. And I still don't know how Jared Cook caught that pass. He catches it, 3 seconds left, gets out of bounds. We kick the field goal and we beat Dallas in the playoffs. And Dallas. If you're going to define how Aaron Rodgers could perform magic, that drive, that 35-second drive, that was Aaron Rodgers' magic at its best. If you're going to put it into the Smithsonian, this is the play that you're going to put. You're going to put the Jared Cook pass. You're going to put that drive. And, you know, there are lots of other very fast drives that he conducted that have been amazing, especially over the second half of your career. But there's nothing like that drive that won the game in Dallas in 2016.
Just definitive. Like you said, it was a surgeon. It was just exactly what needed to be done. Nobody else was going to make that throw. Right. Because I remember, I mean, Joe Buck's like, oh, that's not they're like, that's not a catch. Well, it was. I mean, it wasn't disputed. It was very clear that it was. And like, how in the hell did that get there that fast with that amount of precision where only the receiver could catch it? It just, that's what was fun. But again, this was, you know, we kind of got used to this, right? Because it was like, oh, whether it was the Hail Mary, you know, I don't know if they changed it from the Hail Mary to the Aaron Rodgers, you know, because I mean, historically ridiculous when it comes to Hail Mary passes, right? Just ridiculous percentages that he's hit. I mean, it's like historically it's like an onside kick, right? It's very, 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 very low. But I tell you what, some of those, the Detroit Hail Mary, the Arizona Hail Mary, I think the Detroit one, on that Thursday night game when it was like, oh, this is awful. And he threw the damn thing like 70 plus yards in the air. I'm like, that's incredible. Just stuff like that, where you just like, if you were there, if you didn't give up on the game, just unbelievable. And that's, again, he always gave us a chance to win. It was always exciting. You put a chip on his shoulder, almost historically, right? Because of his draft position. Watch out. That's, so I'm, part of me, provided he goes to the Jets, great. Put him in the AFC, right? That's cool. That's fine. And let him, if he's got a big ass chip on his shoulder again, let him tear up the AFC. That's cool. That's fine. And if it's a Packers Jets Super Bowl, whoa.
Hey, that'll be fun.
That Arizona game that second Arizona playoff game that we lost as well. I mean, that just sort of exemplified Aaron Rodgers. And unfortunately, Larry Fitzgerald was just at a different level from anyone else in that game. But Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback in that second Arizona game as well, right? It just, we didn't lose those games because of Aaron Rodgers.
No.
Those games were only close because of Aaron Rodgers being involved.
And I think, kind of coming full circle too, that's kind of towards the end here, we weren't getting Aaron Rodgers' best in playoff games, right? And for whatever reason, and we could debate this on, we're not going to, but it's just, that's what we're kind of hoping. Oh, it's got to be there. It's got to be there. It's got to be there. And then what it wasn't, that's what was almost like just as crushing, right? It was just like, oh my God, what happened? We may never know, but that's, the expectation was, okay, the team is good, and as you've pointed out, Neil, multiple times, if the Packers don't rush the ball, there are issues in playoff games.
Well, playoff games you're playing against good teams. That's the difference.
Right.
You can get away with being unbalanced against, the Bears, for example. And although usually you don't have to, because you build up a big lead and then you run the ball at the end. But
irrelevant. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, against good teams, you've got to call the game differently. You've got to play differently. And unfortunately, we've had coaches that have forgotten that a bit too many times.
Enough about the past. We need to really start looking to the future. Not only, kind of what our future is here, we're going to be kind of intermittent throughout the summer, but the Packers' future as well. Now, a couple of things that have happened. They have re-signed Keyshawn Nixon, who, the best kick returner in the league. And as of today, Rudy Ford is coming back in the safety position. But who have we lost? Alan Lazard, as we talked about, as a free agent going to the New York Jets. Robert Tonyan signing a deal with the Chicago Bears. And
Jeff is in pain right now.
Yeah.
Need a hug.
Add to that, Jeff, coming to your town, Dean Lowry signs with the Minnesota Vikings after 7 seasons in Green Bay on the defensive line. And Neil, you wanted to point out Yosh Nijman. It looks like he's probably going to stick around because they tagged a second-round tender on.
That's good. I don't think any team is giving a second-round pick for him, and so we get to sort of see his continued development. And I think that's the key for young linemen, is see their continued development.
And I do like this offensive line. I think that it's going to be pretty solid. We had a good year this year. There is a good young core group. I'm of the opinion that I think you draft a lineman every year because it always helps to have depth at that position. The need position probably is tight end. Safety could be one of them as well. But I guess technically we need a backup quarterback, don't we?
So you get a quarterback in there too.
Do you draft a backup quarterback, or do you go get a veteran who's going to provide leadership?
As long as he's better than Brian Braum, I don't care.
But the Jordan Love era soon to begin in Green Bay. We got to see him play a few times, and I think progressively he has gotten better every time. Amazing how history is repeating itself again. A guy getting to watch Hall of Fame quarterback play for 3 years and moves right into the starting quarterback role for this long and storied franchise.
Just a reminder, going back to 2008 when Aaron Rodgers took over, people weren't sure that Aaron Rodgers was going to be the guy, right? There was a lot of doubt. And that's part of why Brian Braum was drafted in the second round, is that, well, we need backups in case Rodgers does not succeed. And, specifically, if you look at Rodgers' numbers in his first 3 years for the Packers, 35 of 59, 319 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. That's only 5.4 yards per attempt in his first 3 years. And he was sacked 9 times for 70 yards. So a net 3.7 yards per attempt for Rodgers in those first 3 years. So there was reason for doubt. I'm here to tell you that Jordan Love's numbers over his first 3 years are better than those of Aaron Rodgers. 606 yards, 7.3 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns with 3 interceptions. So 6.8 net yards per attempt versus 3.7 for Rodgers. So, that doesn't, of course, mean anything as far as what's going to happen with Jordan Love's career. But Jordan Love has certainly gotten off to a start that is better than Aaron Rodgers' start before he was a starting quarterback. And so I think that we certainly have reason to have optimism, and we'll see how it plays out. But we have optimism. There are a couple other things about Jordan Love versus Aaron Rodgers that are kind of interesting. Their 40 times are basically identical, 474 versus 471.
Mm-hmm.
Their combine, or their height on the vertical, is essentially distance 35.5 versus 34.5 for Rodgers. Their numbers are basically the same coming out of college as far as the combine statistics are concerned. Obviously, Jordan Love has had the opportunity to learn from Aaron Rodgers, and I'm very excited for the start of the Jordan Love era.
I agree with you, Neil. The naysayers, in the transition to Rodgers were plentiful. I don't want to get into a lot of those details, but they were wrong. There were naysayers in the transition to Brett Favre, and they were wrong. So our hope here is that any naysayers on Jordan Love will also be wrong. This is our quarterback. This is our team, and we are looking forward to this next season.
Absolutely.
He's not the best color man in the business for nothing, guys.
Yes.
All right. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button, leave a comment along with the other 400,000 people watching us this week. It'll be great. You can find the GBC podcast at Green Bay Chat. That's all one word, Green Bay Chat. We are on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat, and on Facebook at the GBC podcast, Green Bay Chat. And may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Good night, and go Jordan Love.
And happy St. Patrick's Day as well.